And I was a soccer kid and I didn't know where practice was. So I walked into the football coach's office. I said, "Coach, hey, where's soccer practice? I'm going to tryouts." He looked me head to toe, which he always did, and said to me, "You're not going to play soccer. You're playing football." I said, "What?" And I randomly would get some letters from agents. So I got a couple, and I was just, I got them from my dad. They're sending them home, and I didn't know anything about it. Certainly my dad would never know anything about that. So I kind of brought him to the line coach. I said, "Listen, I'm getting these, you know what this means?" He said, "Hey, a couple teams have been calling about you." I said, "What? Are you kidding me?"
To make it to the highest level in sports, it does take a ton of different things. Size, talent, athletic ability, genetics, who you know, and many other factors all matter when it comes to getting to the highest level. But sometimes fate, luck, whatever you want to call it, also steps in and has a completely different plan for you. Like when a high school football coach looks at a 15-year-old soccer player and goes, "You're a big dude. You're playing football." And that exact conversation changed Mike Flynn's life forever. Coach Flynn is a proud Agawam, Massachusetts native, and he was just named the head coach of the historic Hamilton Wenham High School after being dominant at Pingree for 6 seasons, winning 2 bowl games and having a perfect season in 21. But his coaching success is only half of his story. Flynn played 10 seasons for the Baltimore Ravens, playing against some of the best talent like Warren Sapp, but he also played with some of the best talent, Ray Lewis, Ed Reed, and he shared the offensive line with Hall of Famer Jonathan Ogden. And in 2001, he became a Super Bowl champion on what was considered one of the most dominant teams of all time. And I know what you're thinking. Oh, well, he must have been a 5-star who played at a Power 4 program. No, he wasn't. Flynn went up to UMaine and he was undrafted. He had to fight to get everything he ever had. This is a coaching story like no other. So I reached out to Coach Flynn. I've known him throughout the years covering Pingree, and I asked him if recruiting board could tell his story. And I'm very thankful he said yes. Everyone take this time, like, share, and of course, subscribe to the best family on YouTube. The 25 season is coming up, and guys, I just announced that I am going to be hosting Massachusetts' first ever high school football media day. It's actually the first media day in all of New England history, and I'm very proud to be hosting it, so you're not going to want to miss out on all the content I have planned for it. Oh, and drop a comment on this video if you don't know what to say. Thank Coach Flynn for being on the show, or just say we love recruiting board. Easy as that. Likes and comments boost this video across YouTube. Let's jump into the Coach Mike Flynn interview.
Recruiting board family, we made it out to the beautiful Hamilton Wenham High School. We get to sit down with new head coach of the Generals, Coach Mike Flynn, obviously a friend of the channel, as you guys know throughout the years. But Coach, how you doing today?
Great to be here. Glad you asked me to get on, talk about our program, talk about me a little bit, but excited to be here, obviously. Big connection to the town. Sons go to this school, going to be coaching my son. You mentioned new project we going on out there. I think it's a $15 million project for the whole school. Fields, baseball, softball, tennis court. So it's a great time to be part of athletics here. So looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to this start.
And how's your spring been going so far, Coach?
Good.
You're first with the team.
Yeah, it was good. We had a meeting after I got the job, and certainly buzz for that, right? New coach, change is good. Sometimes good, sometimes it's bad, but change is good, right? Because it opens some eyes, opens ears, right? I met with the team, and right away got really good feedback with them in terms of energy. And that's what you want, right? As a coach, new coach, that's the advantage you have, right? They're looking to you for answers, right? They want things to change, so they're open to a message, right? So you got to come in strong and take advantage of what you had. And we've had great workouts, very strong for that winter period. Now we're in our spring sports, smaller schools, you see that even at the prep school level. Those smaller schools, we have kids that play 2, a lot of them play 3 sports. So now we have to work around those schedules, right? So one day we have 25 kids and we have 8 and we have 30. I just have to be available. Fortunately, I'm working in the middle school. I can do that. But a lot of energy, a lot of buzz with the town and the boosters, which is important. This program has had a pretty good history. In the Cape Ann League, not so many years ago, playoff type teams. You look at outside our weight room, we have a hallway of pictures of the former teams and their records, and you walk down and you realize, right, this is a proud program. And they've struggled the last few years, and there's a lot of reasons for that, right? And I think now with these new facilities, we're going to keep kids staying here as opposed to going to private and re-energize the school base, right? And get kids that are better athletes in school that maybe they didn't play a fall sport, but now they're going to come out because they want to be a part of the Friday Night Lights.
I appreciate you opening up with that, Coach. And
yeah.
Now we get to get into you.
Here we go.
That's why we're all here, Coach.
Yeah, I'll try to make it very interesting as best I can,
Well, I think you got an interesting story, Coach. That's why we wanted to tell it. But first, we always start at the beginning, Coach.
Yep.
So Tell us where you're from.
I'm from out in Western Mass, Agawam, Mass. Six Flags, it used to be Riverside, is there. That's kind of, from Pennsylvania, from New Jersey to Massachusetts. That's pretty much all So out in Western Mass, went to Cathedral High School out in Springfield, Mass, which is now gone, unfortunately. I don't know if you remember a while back, they had tornadoes kind of knocked that school out, but that's kind of my background. I'm a Western Mass guy. Went to school, University of Maine, from there, played football there, and then obviously to the Ravens. But, I've been in Massachusetts, it's my home, but, a Western Mass guy. I met my wife, and that's kind of why we moved out to the eastern part of the state. Much more entertaining than where I was from, right? Springfield's like, you got Worcester and you got Hartford, and then anything in between is where I live. But enjoy the time out there. Still have a lot of friends. My parents are still living out there up until about a year ago. So that's kind of background where I'm from.
People from here know Western Mass. There's a little edge out there, Coach.
Well, yeah, because this, once you get, and I'm even going to put it, Framingham, I think people in the eastern part of the state don't think it exists. So we do have a chip on their shoulder, and I know a lot of the guys from Excel out there and Central, and they carry that chip. And that's kind of what's driven that program and how well they've been, right? But yeah, 100%, right? That we don't get respect from this part of the state, which is true, by the way, because I played out there for a lot of years.
Yeah.
And we used to play some of those Eastern Masters. We used to scrimmage Brockton. We used to play Lynn Classical, stuff like that. So yeah, there is that edge. You get to Worcester and you get to Springfield, like there's not a lot of respect from this part of the state, and we'll wear that on our sleeve. It's real. Trust me, you could feel it when you go out there.
So how'd you start playing football?
Yeah, interesting. I was a soccer kid, if you can believe it. Soccer, basketball, baseball. Your typical thing. We didn't have youth football in my town. If we did, I don't remember it. I ended up going to high school. Cathedral had a real strong program. Bill Wise Jr. was the head coach there. He actually coached at Lynn Classical for a lot of years. He's from the western part of the state. His dad was a legendary coach at Cathedral High School. He took the job over. And I was a soccer kid, and with my frame, there probably wasn't a future in it, but that's all I knew. I was going through in school one day, and I didn't know where practice was. So I walked into the football coach's office. Now, there was a time, you see me, I'm a kind of outgoing guy, where the football coach in a high school program in 1988, they're very dominant personalities, right? It's a little different era of football guy. Bike shorts, bike pants, the tight bike shirts, like you're different guys. I walked in and he was sitting, his back to me, and I, excuse me, coach, and he was a classic gym teacher, AD at the time. I said, Coach, I'm looking to find out, hey, where's soccer practice? I'm going to tryouts. And he stood there, he didn't respond, and I'm sure it was 5 or 6 seconds. Felt like forever before he turned around. And he had that old swivel chair, that lean back. Swiveled around and leaned back, and he looked me head to toe, which he always did. Always eyeing up guys, said to me, you're not going to play soccer. You're playing football. I said, what? Now, good freshman coaches, anybody's a good football, your freshman coaches are the backbone of a good program. There's this 2 old Italian guys we had there, Fred Simani and Joe Federico. I mean, they must have been 90 when I was there. At least they looked 90. And all of a sudden he yells out, Joe, get in here. Joe Federico came in, same guy, just Chevrolet guy, old Italian guy, dragged me into the equipment room and started fitting me up for equipment. And I never even shook hands with this guy. I ran out of there, went to soccer practice. Scared as hell. I was like, I love football. I mean, I knew football, but it wasn't my thing. So went to soccer practice, but seriously, just like the next few days just kept a gnawing on me, like football. Maybe that's for me. And I knew a couple kids in school that I was friendly with as a freshman. So they already had their camp. They already started the season, and I wasn't even part of that yet. So I went home one day. I said to my dad, I'm going to play football. And he just looked at me and laughed. Football? Why? I said, I don't know. Went in the next day. I was padded up, ready to play. That's a story. I mean, it's that simple. Never played flag football. We didn't have it at the time. Never played football. Just thrown in the backyard. Ended up just playing football. Thank God for freshman football. I think that's one thing that as programs get smaller that kids miss out on. The freshman football experience. I worked at Masco last year and we had a freshman team. And those coaches were modeled after the guys that I had when I was in high school. You learn so much. I mean, if I had my, you can college back in the day, right? Freshmen couldn't play varsity. Adjust to college. In high school, I would have the same thing. Like, I don't care how good you are at high school. If you have a freshman team, you need to play freshman football. But I learned everything I needed to know in that 6 months. I mean, the first game I was right tackle, ran downfield on a pass. I mean, that's the kind of stuff I was doing. But it was great. It was a great experience for me. When a lot of people, you see where you end up and how far you go, they're like, what? You played soccer? You're on the freshman football team? Like, you didn't know where like there was more stories maybe like that now because there wasn't as much specialization that you see now where these kids are mass elite doing all these different things. But back then, that was kind of the way you went. There are not many freshman kids that played, but that's kind of my story. I got started and, the rest is history. The program was great. When I was there, they went to 3 Super Bowls in 4 years.
Wow.
Won 3 of them. What Bill Wise was doing when I was in high school, like that's stuff I did in college and stuff I did in the pros. And I was fortunate too. We had a lot of good players. The classes before me, Harvard, BU, Northeastern, Syracuse, UNH, on and on and on. Division I scholarship players. So we had a lot of schools coming in. So as an early kid, like watching these kids play and at the level they were at and kind of seeing colleges come in, wasn't on my radar, but I was surrounded by that. Weight room programs where it was, 4 days a week and there was dedicated to it that you didn't see as much back then in high schools like you do now, where it's pretty much a standard thing. So yeah, that was it. That was my introduction. I was a soccer player, then to playing football. So
when did you know I'm actually kind of good at this thing?
Yeah, you know what? I don't know, because I just love playing. I found that when I made that transition to football, and a lot of guys, the locker room, the teammates I had, friends I made, I loved it. I guess I would say like my junior year, the recruiting thing was much different back then. Everything, unless you were a real top recruit, whereas most kids now are just Division III guys are still doing stuff their junior year. You know what I mean? Back then it wasn't like that. But yeah, probably around my junior year, like BC or Rutgers sending some stuff for like, hey, want to come to our spring game or do stuff like this. So that's the first kind of idea that I had. And then certainly from there, right? Then you go into your senior year, and we had visits after high school, and you did your visits and you committed, whereas kids are doing that earlier, but same type of stuff. And I realized, right, I had an opportunity to play and, be a scholarship player, which was important for me. Being from where I was from and working class, that was most important for me, not having to have my parents play for college. As I go through that now, kind of that burden. But, probably in my, junior year, into my senior year, I said, all right, I'm a pretty good player, right? I'm playing for a pretty good team. I've started for a couple of years. I had a thought that I had a chance to play in college.
Yeah, at that time, though, I want to ask, who were some of the best players you played against in high school?
I'm trying to think who we had a big rival with Central at the time, but they were just a budding, rivalry. We would beat them a lot. That certainly has changed with that program. Westfield had some really good players. They were a powerhouse back then. It used to be us too. Northampton was a very good program. We usually kind of dominated the college guys that went on to that second level in the area. Holyoke was good when I was there. A kid by the name of Westbrook had a good players there. But usually, those were our rivalry type games. We were kind of that dominant force there. And we were similar, like we were a private Catholic school, so we were disliked like some schools are around here. And at the time, it didn't make sense. And now I'm on the other end of it saying, oh, okay, I get it. There wasn't a town at Cathedral, you know what I mean? We had kids from Connecticut that played on the team. But yeah, I played a lot of great players there. And certainly on this side at that time was, I believe, those Brockton years, they were at the kind of top then. That's when we had some really good teams, and we'd scrimmage them. And it was, eye-opening, good players, but man, we'd have some battles, But yeah, it was a good year for us in Western Mass. We had some pretty good teams out there. But all those teams, they had a lot of good players that went on and played at different levels of college.
So what made you choose UMaine?
Yeah, it's interesting. I first I thought it was maybe bigger schools. I was kind of that player that if this guy did accept a scholarship, well, that was my opportunity at the, that next Division I level. Because I was athletic, I was big, but I wasn't overly developed physically. I probably didn't commit into the weight room as much as I should have. So I kind of slotted in well at that FCS level. And at the time it was Northeastern and BU, Maine, New Hampshire, like that type, Holy Cross. I ended up coming down. I wasn't sure I wanted to be in the city. I came down to Maine and New Hampshire, and I chose Maine. It was just, I had a feeling. Kirk Ferentz was there at the time. As we progressed in my story, it ended up paying off for me. But Kirk Ferentz was the head coach there. I liked the assistant coach, Jack Crosby, who coached there forever. Was there, a guy by the name of John Bonamigo that I liked a lot. They recruited me, and I just felt comfortable. And when I'm up there, Maine is a unique place, right? It's very hard to recruit up there. Get some Jersey kids, some New York kids, a lot of Mass and Mainers, Very unique kids. And I went to 5 years of college with some very unique dudes, which I would not trade for anything. And I just felt comfortable. When you're making decisions as an 18-year-old kid, for me personally, I wasn't basing on what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. I mean, I could barely take care of myself when I got to college, I just felt I loved the coaches. I loved the kids. When I went on the recruiting trips, I went up there several times. And that, I just had a feeling and it worked out. It just felt right for me.
And talk about playing. So you played for Cosgrove.
Yeah.
Again, he was there for, 15 years, 20 years?
Yeah, something like 20 years. So he got the job. So my first year was probably like 94. And he was there for a good 20 years. I mean, perfect Maine coach, right? It's hard to get coaches up there because they don't have the money to pay assistant coaches. So you need a guy that's going to stay there. They have a coach there now that I think he's a Maine guy. He wants to be there, So those assistant coaches come and go. I noticed as I got into the professional ranks, and then working over at Pingree with recruiting, I mean, I run into more guys that have coached at Maine, that played there, like the tentacles of that school, because it's kind of a little bit of a stepping stone for the assistant coaches. You know, going up there and playing up there, meeting a lot of people, and playing for Jack was great. Kirk Ferentz for a year, and Jack was the head coach for the rest of the time. And we struggled for a few years, but then it kind of fell into place where, you know, we had Joe Gilbert was the offensive run game coordinator, offensive coordinator, and he has been with like the Carolina Panthers. He was with Tampa when they won a Super Bowl. Neil McGrath, who was defensive coordinator at Brown for so many years, he started getting the defense coordinator. So when that came together, we started getting successful. You know, we were very good my senior year, and we saw after that they made playoff runs from that kind of era. So it was good. It's good being up there, and you know, things have changed, you know, facility-wise, which is good for the program. But I enjoyed it. You know, Jack was a great head coach, great guy, loved the program, loved the school, loved the state. He went there. You needed a guy like that up there. So.
Would you say he shaped your coaching career at all now?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there's not a coach that doesn't shape you in some way, good or bad, right? You have coaches that will say, you know, that's not the way I would approach things. But Jack was a great communicator, right? His interaction with the kids, but the way he interacted with the other coaches and families. You see that how dealing with it at Pingree and here. Pingree a little bit more because you do recruit a little bit more there, but how he interacted with families, right? How he handled players and games. Any positional coach or head coach, they touch you in so many different ways. But, you know, his demeanor was great. And I still talk. I literally just talked to him, you know, yesterday about a kid from here, and I've talked to him a lot, and he's always asking. But great guy, cared about the players. So when you have a guy like that in college, great atmosphere because it was a small community, wasn't a bigger school, so he had that option to really care for the players. My senior year, I ended up being a captain, so I had a lot of chance. You know, we had more personal conversations that I enjoyed, you know, whether it's individually or as a captain group. So, you know, Jack was, you know, certainly a part of molding me as a player. But then, you know, looking back now, you know, you always pick different things from coaches, whether it was their philosophy, how they teach, but it could be something quick and passing that they did. You know, you always pick that up and you try to put these pieces together and mold what you are as a coach.
So, do you have a welcome to college football moment?
You know, I had a lot of them. I think it was, you know, for me personally, there's this kid by the name of Todd Park, and he was from, where was Lincoln, Maine? But this guy looked like a big old grizzly bear that got shaved. Like, he was that guy. I mean, he was a muscle from his ankle to his nose. He was the strongest kid. Come to find out, he was a great guy, but when you come as 18-year-old freshman and you see him on, never wore a shirt, always jeans and construction boots. So all through camp, I just see this guy walking around and yelling. And eventually, I had to go against him in one-on-ones. Well, needless to say, mentally, my mental toughness was about this big. And he buried me, you know what I mean? It was that moment that, like, I was pretty good in high school against pretty good kids, but now here's a junior that just stepped over me like I was nobody and realized I had to adjust my weight room habits. But yeah, that happens to everybody. You know, look, I see kids that are great in 8th grade. They come to high school, they have to learn. Great in high school, they go to college, they have to learn. Great players at the college level go to professional, they have to learn. So if you don't have that moment, man, I feel bad for you, right? Because if it's too easy, right, you don't know how to push through. So, man, I had those in high school. I was fortunate. We had a kid by the name of Aaron Hunter. Very same thing. Same guy. Never wore a shirt. Ended up going to Syracuse. Offensive lineman. Scared the hell out of me. Never said boo to me. And to find out, these guys are usually pretty good guys. But when you're a kid, you're scared to talk to them. But same thing. Our thing was 5 live. You'd have 5 guys carry the ball, and you'd have to tackle them. And of course, it'd be Aaron Hunter, the Todd Parks of the world, and little old Mike Flynn, right? So, you know, I've had those pretty much at every level.
Who was the best player you played against in college?
That's a good question. We played a kid down in Central Florida, Greg Jefferson. He got drafted. There was a kid out of New Hampshire called Mike Foley. Played him 2 years. Rival. He may have got drafted in the 3rd round by the Patriots even. He was a defensive end, very good player. I think they wanted to move him eventually offense when he got to the pros. But he was probably the best guy that I played personally. I mean, I had to have playing back-to-back years, so it got personal. And he was kind of an ass. You know, like he liked to talk. You know what I mean? Which, you know, football, that's part of the game. And the higher up on the ladder, the more and more that happens. But he was that type of guy. He kind of had that chip, that attitude and edge when he was a junior in college, you know, so, and he was always that guy I was chasing, you know, when I was a sophomore or he was a junior. When I was a junior, he was a senior, and he was all conference this year, and I was chasing. He was all conference the next year. So he was probably the best guy in college that I played. He was a really good football player, and I'm surprised he didn't, that switch maybe. He was a little undersized, but as a defensive lineman, he was great. And I think he ended up playing a year or 2 in the pros.
I'm glad you brought up New Hampshire, because that was a team I wanted to ask you about.
Yeah.
Rivalry, a very historic.
The Musket rivalry, yeah, very historic. And yeah, it came down to those 2 schools, and Bill Bowes was the coach at the time. And I liked the school. You know, I had some guys from high school that were there, and it was a tough choice. They weren't happy. Maine was, they were not happy. And, unfortunately for most of my career, they got the better of us. But we won my senior year, which was important to me. But it was great. And they have a great program. And Coach Santos, I've seen multiple times. And some of those coaches come down recruiting guys that I've had. And it's an awesome program. And historically, very good. And I think it's because it's like the difference between New Hampshire, where New Hampshire is, and Maine is, right? When you're trying to get these Jersey, New Yorkers, and maybe a little bit further south, they're like, all right, I can make it to New Hampshire, right? Fly into Logan or drive up to that, but that extra 3.5 hours is a killer because, I don't know how far north you've been. You get to Portland, you're like, oh, this is great. Like, oh no, you're just buckling in. You got another 2.5 hours north. So, and I tell you, there were a lot of times when I was driving home 8 at night going, damn, why didn't I go to New Hampshire? I'd be home by now. Great program. It was just, like I said, it was just when you're 18, all you can go on is instinct. It worked out for me, but I have nothing bad. I mean, if I went there, I think it still would have turned out great.
Was it a little bit of a culture shock going up there, Coach? From Western Mass to all the way up to Orono?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely different. I thought Maine people were different. Very nice, opening doors for you, saying thank you. And my dad and I joked about it all the time earlier. Now, I have a coach on staff that I had at Pingree now here that it is from Maine, and I make fun of him all the time about it. But yeah, it was. I mean, it's cold. I mean, I thought it was cold here, but it was cold. And my first year, my parents wouldn't let me take a car up. Just to be like, no, you got to learn. You don't need a car.
Staying up there.
Yep, start walking. And you're walking from dorm to dorm, building to building, because you can't make the trek straight through. The inside of your nose freezing up and bleeding. So it was cold. But man, I tell you, there's not a day goes by where I ever regret going up there. Although I did take a trip down to Miami for my son for college, and it was 82 degrees, you know what I mean? But I loved it up there, but it was different. It definitely was different. Small town, towny feel, which was awesome. But what was really great about it, there wasn't much to do except for the college.
Yeah.
So you really do get close to those guys because it was hanging out in the dorms. It was these different sections where college, they had parties there, people would hang out there. So to me, going to a bigger school with more kids or going to a place with a lot more stuff to do, I don't know. It would definitely be a different feel, and Maine is what I wanted.
When was your moment when you were like, you know what? I think I might be able to play on Sundays.
I had the farthest thing, and I mean this sincerely, the farthest thing from my mind. And
I believe it.
Yeah, coming from Maine, it's not that we had there's a guy by the name of Mike Buck in '87 that got drafted. Dan Jones, who's from Malden, animal, great guy. Another scary guy till you know him. Malden went up to Maine. He played 2 years in the pros, made a Cincinnati Bengals roster. So it wasn't like there wasn't something in Maine so far off. Like you could see it. You saw people that have done it, but it was the farthest thing from my mind. And I randomly would get some letters from agents. If you can believe it, right? They'd send you letters back in the day. There was no social media. There's no cell phones. It was letters. Now everybody would DM you, right?
Yeah.
So they'd send you letters.
Probably when you're 18.
Yeah, different guys. Yes, maybe they would rate draft prospects. And if you're probably for an offensive line in the top whatever, I'm sure these agents that are certified get these listings. So I got a couple, and I was just, I got them from my dad. They're sending them home, and I didn't know anything about it. Certainly my dad would never know anything about that. So I kind of brought him to the O-line coach. I said, listen, I'm getting these, you know what this means? He said, hey, a couple teams have been calling about you. I said, what? Are you kidding me? And it was scary. I'm trying to plan a future all right, well, I think I want to do sports management. They don't have it here. I'll probably try to go to grad school. I was getting all that set up. I think it's probably been my junior year. Yeah, so I was taken aback from it. And then I, told my dad. He was like, my dad couldn't even fathom. So yeah, that was, I thought I was a good player, I guess. You make all conference, you're starting. That to me was, the standard I wanted to set. But then you get that, clearly it's something. They're not gonna waste their time reaching out or anything about a kid from me, right? Unless there's something there. So that was kind of the start of it. And then it kind of snowballed, and I started thinking well, maybe this is something to it. And we had some teams that came up and visited during season and on the road that saw me. And we, had a couple other good players there too. Had another offensive tackle, Dave Riley, who ended up at New York Giants, but I think he was a practice squad for a couple of years. Just kind of couldn't get over that hump, but still obviously hell of an accomplishment, good player. So we had a couple guys there. It just, when I mean out of left field, it just went from there, and going through that process of teams going to see you play and having that stress or coming in and talk to you and hey, why do you do this? And then the whole process of getting an agent and then on of these workouts that we had to do. Because unfortunately, pro days at Maine aren't reality. And I wasn't in the top 300 to go to the combine. So it was I'm working out at UConn, I'm working out at Columbia, I'm working out at Amherst. We get a couple guys in Maine, you know what I mean? So I had to do this like these kids now for colleges, right? Instead of just this is my pro day at Maine, you had to bounce around.
And talk about your NFL draft process
Yeah.
just to build off that. the workouts you did. I want to know about the interviews. Like,
yeah, like it was simple stuff, but the workouts were, basically combine stuff. Sometimes they had 2 workouts in a week, you know what I mean, like back to back. You were allowed to work out a certain mileage from your house and from the school, so you'd reach out. Most of the colleges were great, call the coach of UConn, do you mind if I work out with your guys? Sometimes they don't, right? Because they want, and I get it, they want the spotlight on their guys. And there was a kid by the name of Alex Bernstein. He went to Amherst, and very similar to me, almost got drafted. He's a free agent, but like a really good Division III player, like probably a guy that was draftable close to my house out in Western Mass. And I got to know him. Funny thing about it, he went to the Ravens. I was roommates with him for 2 years, but he's like, yeah, come on down, the coach. And I worked out at Amherst with him, just me and him for the different teams. Ravens being one of them, and the Ravens signing both of us, which is pretty good. But yeah, it's just your combine type drills. The interviews are pretty simple. A lot of times, like, hey, why'd you go to Maine? Or I saw in the game you played right tackle and left tackle. Why? That kind of stuff. A little football IQ stuff,
What was the most interesting question, if you can remember? Like, there's those leadership ones,
Yeah, not anything off the wall. I know, like the Giants, like they had you do this one, or like this test they had. I don't even think it was the one. Like, it's their own special testing, and they had a lot of bizarre questions in there. It's like, that thing where they put up the picture and what do you see? Like, that's kind of what the questions are.
Really?
You're walking down the street. Do you pick up the apple or you're like, what the hell is this? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't know what they get, but that was kind of like the weirdest thing. But most of the guys were pretty cool. And it was like, a lot of the scouts that, end up seeing after the fact. And it's great though too, because those scouts that are going the road looking for the small guys are the hustlers, the workers. And over the course of my career, all those 10, 12 guys I saw, I'd see them like, oh, Mike, it's really good. We liked you. I'm glad you're doing good. Stuff like that. The guy from the Ravens, George Kokanis, who was GM for the Browns and he's back with the Ravens, was one of those guys. He loved the small little school guys. And he put that time in, right? He did that extra drive. That's why the Ravens, for a great patch, did really good job with free agent. Priest Holmes, myself, a lot of them that got on to play long careers. So that process, it was taxing. When guys were done playing football and they're going on spring break and all that kind of stuff, I'm doing these combine things. There's really no guarantee that I'm ever really going to get drafted and or get signed by a team, but clearly it worked out.
It's funny that we're meeting on the day of the NFL draft.
I know. I mean, I hate the NFL draft because when I was playing, I hated it. To me, it was just like basically they're taking guys to take my job. And people laugh. People would call me all the time when I was with the Ravens. Oh, the draft is, who do you think the Ravens are going to get? I'm like, I don't care as long as they'll take a lineman. It's like, hey, I'm trying to earn a living here. You know what I mean? Like, that's how I pay for food, man. It was the worst. It was the worst experience. And, for a couple of years, I was a young guy. When you're not making the big bucks, they're like, hey, come to the draft party. It's free food and drink. They write you a big check to come and be an appearance. And I would do it. And then the draft picks, everybody cheer. Oh, they're taking some lineman from Tennessee. And you're like, oh, God. And everybody's happy and you're just dying inside, I can't believe the NFL's the best, how they market that and people watch it. But I don't like the draft, and that's just because my own 11 years of pain and being scared about who they're going to get, right? After 11 years, it's kind of just like every time I think of the draft, I get nervous,
Did you but when you were preparing, because I don't know, were they broadcasting it then, or how?
Yeah, it was very similar, but they had it over 1 day, 2 days. And once we got to that last couple rounds with the agent, we were, talking hey, there's a chance. And then as soon as the draft was over, pretty much over the next 24 hours went a lot of the action for myself. Which teams were interested? Who did they draft that year? How does it look? What's realistic? And you try to make your best decision. At the end of the day, you're a free agent, right? So no matter where you go, you're at the bottom of the rung. And no matter where you go, they probably drafted a bunch of linemen. Every lineman, when they come to camp, there's 15 guys. And most of them went to big school. There's no perfect situation.
There's some politics in that, Coach?
Well, yeah, certainly, right? I mean, it's going to be very hard to take a kid in the first 3 rounds, pay him that kind of money and have young guys free agents beat him out. It's hard to do because they're going to get opportunities. You see some of these guys that are kind of bust one place, they get opportunities other places. And that's understandable, right? There's jobs in the line, right? If you're that scout, or that coach said, nope, this is my guy, you got to take him. Well, damn well, you better make him into a player, right? That wasn't my mindset then. I didn't realize some of that now, but I knew just trying to find a place where I was comfortable. Weed through rosters as best you can. And it's not like I was a NFL. I mean, the agent was a big, how did I know the lineman rosters of the Packers? I mean, I watch, but I don't know who's good or not. So helped him with that, where I was comfortable, and he ended up going. Kirk Ferentz, who recruited me, was with the Browns. They just moved to Baltimore, the Ravens, talking on the phone for a long time. And it's like, go with what you know. Here's a guy that liked you in college, saw something in you. I knew I was going to get a fair shot. Doesn't mean he can get me on the team, but I knew I have a fair chance. And he's a great coach. He's probably one of the greatest offensive line minds that's ever been in the game. And he had such a long line of Joe Moore, who's a legendary coach with Notre Dame, and Pitt in offensive line was his mentor, and he's mentored a lot of great O-line guys. So I knew that going in, how good he was, what I learned in that one season with him. So I'm like, you know what? It just made a lot of sense. So when we went through all that, it's like, yeah, I'm going to go to Baltimore. So yeah, sometimes it's good to be lucky.
Talk about those first few years, though.
Yeah.
Because again, you're undrafted at that time. Were you discouraged at all when you were undrafted?
No, because like I said, I mean, undrafted. I went there. They gave me per diem. Like $200 a day or whatever it was, and washing your clothes for you. When you need a drink of water, they give you the water. Like, to me, it was like coming from Maine. I wasn't discouraged because I didn't have any expectation. Honestly, I just wasn't prepared for it. I just didn't expect it. If you go to BC or Tennessee, right? There's an expectation like, okay, that's a goal, and maybe you prepare a different way. So I thought it was just all like gravy. I'm like, if I can get through a couple mini camps, I'd be proud of myself. I didn't have a lot of confidence, but not confidence in myself, but confidence that I would get much further than that. But it was stuff that first year. It's a numbers game, and you're like, all right, they're going to take 10 linemen, and you're like, oh, I'm like number 8 here. This and that. I think I can make the team. And then the last day of cuts, I get cut. They cut 4 linemen, trade 3 linemen, just bring 4 new guys in. So you're just like, wait a minute, I was one of the 10 best, but you just got rid of 6 guys and brought in 6 new guys. So that's how it works. So you learn another lesson, right? You're really not competing against teams or players in your group. You're competing against guys in 30 other teams. So that first year was tough. Went down to Tampa for a week on the practice squad, and worked out because the O-line coach down at Tampa ended up being my line coach eventually in Baltimore for quite a few years, and he kind of helped me stick around for a few more years. So it's like weird how all these I get cut, I'm only on Tampa for a week, but in that week, like, we had a really good relationship because we got to let you go because we need a different position on our practice squad, but I think you got a future in this league. And home bloat, 7 years later, he's my coach for 4 years, And then I was out of football for a little bit. And that's where you get to that crossroads, It's like, okay, is it over? What do I do? And I made a decision, listen, I'm going to see this out through a year, that go through the year, get into a camp another year, and then if it doesn't work out, it'd be over. So I went back up to Maine because I knew hanging around home wasn't going to work for me. So I went up in Maine. I worked with a strength coach up there. I lived in my buddy's basement, like literally on a mattress in the basement, but it was an unfinished basement for about 6 or 7 weeks working out. I helped the team a little bit. Everybody's like, why are you back? Swallow a little pride. Hey, you got cut. But I knew for me, it was okay, right? That's where I needed to be. Because if I was home and just hung out, I wouldn't do what I needed to do. And after that window, Jacksonville called and wanted me on their practice squad. And it was great. It was great to go down there. I was there for a lot of the season on the practice squad. Coach Coughlin was down there, and it was tough. I mean, he was a tough coach. And the practices, like, those guys were like, miserable. Like, they were miserable when they lost, they were miserable when they were won. But they were a good coach, and they were such a standard he set. And then they had a lot of really good players. They had a great run when Tom Coughlin was there, and eventually what he did with the Giants, right? But it was a really good experience for a lot of reasons. I didn't particularly like Jacksonville much, but I was there and was around really good football players. Mark Brunell, like some of the best linemen. Tony Baselli, a Hall of Fame lineman. Mike Mazer, who coached at BC, a great O-line coach, like old school, hard knocks, dip, all over his teeth, spitting on you type guy. This guy, Brian DeMarco from Michigan State, just a bit, like real tough guys. And I learned a lot from them. And then eventually it worked out. Kurt called me up and like, hey, we want to bring you back to our roster where they can sign you from a practice squad. And I always wanted to go back to Baltimore because I really love the guys there and I love the coach. And my agent called like, listen, Jacksonville really likes you. Why don't we get some money? I said, no, I want to go. So So she said, I tell Coach Coughlin, like, no way, I'm scared of him. Don't tell Coach Coughlin. So I decided, I took all my stuff, I was gonna leave. Well, Baltimore was playing Jacksonville that week. You have to do it within like 36 hours of when you play that team that week, and we missed the cutoff. So I had to go back, knowing that I was going to the Ravens like as soon as that game was over.
Really?
So I had to practice her the whole week, and I was, oh man, you want to talk about, I was like a 22-year-old kid scared that they knew I was leaving. But my agent never said anything to him because I just didn't want to be there. It wasn't personal, I loved Baltimore a lot. It wasn't for me, I didn't like where I was. So the whole week I was like, pins and needles, and I took all my stuff. And after the game, I was going through the handshake, all the guys, hey, see you tomorrow, see you tomorrow, see you tomorrow. It's like, shh. So I ended up like the next day, I was out of there. And Jacksonville was not happy. It's like, why would he leave? Baltimore's not good. But it was fine, right? They cared, but they didn't care. But I ended up going to Baltimore last 3 weeks of the season on the roster, and then I was there the rest of my career. Yeah. It worked out. I've just been lucky. I could have stayed at Jacksonville. Jacksonville, I think the next year was 14-2, AFC Championship. They're a competitor for years after that. But I just, I've been lucky with just kind of having an instinct of where to go, what's the right coach. And that's, people ask, what is it? I go, there's luck involved, and that's it, right? I just felt I was valued more there, and it was a really good group of linemen at Baltimore, and another Hall of Fame lineman in Jonathan Ogden. But they were like very friendly and it was competitive, but not competitive. Like they wanted you to do well. And I remember going there, and you hear these horror stories about rookies. Like I never bought anything. Like they were the best, you know what I mean? And I just knew that from that time I had in camp with them, that's where I wanted to be. And I still talk to those guys. I mean, I played with them for like 10, 11 years. So yeah, I got lucky on that.
How were you able to work your way up from being that like 53rd man to having a 10-year NFL career though? Yeah,
well that's, I don't want to say luck, it's opportunity. My first season in Baltimore, that first year where I did get cut, and the second year where I made the team, we had center guard position, we had 4 or 5 guys go down. Achilles, ACLs. I go from my first year as a rookie free agent, I played in every preseason game. I played at least a 1 full half to almost 3 quarters in each game, which is unheard of as a free agent rookie. You may get 10 snaps. So that first year when I was playing against pro starters at times, or those first round draft picks, it's Tampa that saw that, got that tape of me, where most kids they don't see. Jacksonville got the tape, like this kid's got something. And then the next year was the same thing. Like I got back to the bottom of the chart, but we had 3 or 4 guys go down, knee injuries, Achilles, like torn pecs. Same thing, I ended up playing 3 quarters. And now I was just in a whole off-season program as a professional, right? Where they were paying me to lift and work out. That's all I did, twice a day. Now my performance was better. And now like, you know what? This kid may be a year away, but he's gonna be cheap and he's gonna be a company guy. He's gonna work hard, and I made the roster. So I had opportunity, like any one of those years, if those guys in front of me didn't get hurt, I probably am not in the NFL because those guys were making money. Those guys were higher draft picks, but when they're hurt, they gotta play somebody. And I took advantage of that opportunity. You gotta be ready for it. So that's where that, just having a feeling with Baltimore, I don't wanna say lucky, because I felt those guys ended up coming back and playing, but they were great guys. You don't want anybody to get hurt, but when they do, man, and like in the NFL, man, it is like a vacuum, right? You just get sucked up in there, and you have to, you don't have sympathy for them, like, because you're still looking out for yourself. So that's just an opportunity arose. And my first 2 years, it's like we just, at that center guard position, they just like, guys got hurt. And I went up there, they're like, Kirk was like, learn to play center now. My first snap at center was against Tony Saragusa. So that's how you learn the NFL. I mean, I'm sure that's part of the reason why they're like, hey, this kid's got something, right? He never played center before, and now he's snapping against this guy. But it was opportunity. That's what those first couple of years.
Was there a welcome to the NFL moment you want to share?
Oh, geez, there's too many of them, man. I mean, just the attitudes. Like, you want to talk. Totally different attitudes. And because when you go to Maine, right, there's a lot of people that are like you. And what I mean by that is like Northeast guys. You're all kind of cut from the same rock, Maine. But then when you go to Baltimore, man, it's Texas guys, Florida guys, California guys, SEC school guys, the Midwest guys, then Northeast, and they're all different. They all have their different attitude, and they're all bravado, and they're all the best at what they do. The intensity, the trash talking, confrontation on a daily basis of the fighting, and it was different then too because the practice structure was different, and some of that stuff was more encouraged than it is now in terms of fighting, and your 2 practices a day at 3 hours apiece, and there was more hitting. I mean, my first year there, I must have lost 30 pounds in camp. It was so intense because we started not too far after July 4th. It was the 1 year, I think it was 1997, it's a long time ago. The NFL season started in August. The first game was August. And this was when after Baltimore moved from Cleveland, we had 40 rookie and first year players in the roster that year. So we had a whole week of camp of just first year guys. Then the veterans came in just for a whole week. So I was in camp 2 weeks before we even really got going. So I was just like, man, what the hell am I doing here? I think, this isn't Kansas anymore. I mean, I had welcome to NFL moments in my 10th year in the league.
Yeah.
We're in Pittsburgh one game, even just not related to me, we're in Pittsburgh one year. Jonathan Ogden is probably the greatest lineman to ever play the game. And we're in Pittsburgh, and he's coming across to get a safety, and this safety boom, hit him right into the chin. And never seen it. 6'9", 330-pound guy, 5 feet off the ground like this, floating in the air and going down, right? And that's like the greatest guy to ever play the game.
Yeah.
Like there's nobody in that league that doesn't get knocked on their ass, you know? My last year in the league, there's welcome to the NFL moment. It's just, they're constant there. You have to have tough skin at that level.
He was a player I wanted to ask because, Coach, you played with like some friggin' dudes in Baltimore. Like, just to name a few, some of the best players at the position.
Ever.
Like Ray Lewis.
Best at his position.
Ed Reed.
Best at his position.
Jonathan Ogden.
Best at his position.
Let's see, Terrell Suggs.
Arguably one of the best. Shannon Sharp.
Shannon Sharp.
One of the
Deion
best.
Sanders.
Deion Sanders, best at his position.
Like, Coach, those dudes, and you're just a guy from Maine, and
Yeah.
you're like seeing these. What's that like?
It's I did the numbers, including Ozzie Smith, who was the GM there. It was like 9 Hall of Famers, which is pretty amazing.
That's wild.
Yeah, and they were all different, right? They, like Jonathan Ogden was just so naturally skilled. One thing they all had though is they were competitive. And that's what kids don't get. They're 6'2", 220, or they can run this, they can run that, but they don't realize like that everybody at some point is that. It's the competitive. Those guys were so competitive. Then you had like, they were clearly freaks of nature, like Shannon Sharp. The way he would lift, and Ray Lewis, just like, what people don't realize, when he was in his prime, he was 255, 260 running like he did. Ed Reed is the best safety ever played. Jonathan Ogden was 6'9", 330. His arms were 10 feet long. Like Peter Boulware was a Pro Bowler. Mike McCrary was a Pro Bowler. Like, they had borderline Hall of Fame careers, but they had injury issues. They would have been Hall of Fame guys. They were all had those freak bodies in terms of length and all that kind of stuff, but they were all so competitive. So competitive. And that's what separated them from the other good players. But yeah, it was great learning from them, watching them from afar. And it was hard, because, you can't emulate your game after them. Certainly, Jonathan, I'm never going to be able to do what Jonathan could do. You can't do what Deion Sanders can do, what Ed Reed can do, but it's great to be around them. There's some leadership qualities there and all interesting personalities, but the biggest thing I took from them is the competitiveness. To the point where, like, when I was at the end of my career and I was a guy that was high stress and always working, and I felt I needed to be because I was a good athlete but not the best type of player. But even in my 10th, 11th year when I knew it was winding down for me, I always thought Ray Lewis had this energy, even if it's that false bravado, right? Like, fake enthusiasm is better than no enthusiasm, but he always had it at practice. And it amazed, I don't know how he could do it. I mean, I'd be exhausted just listening to him, let alone doing it. But those great players, man, just loved the practice, loved the game. He elevated the level of the team, but it was great, man. It's great to have that, seeing those guys live on a week-to-week basis, And
it's funny that you mentioned Jonathan Ogden, because, some of these kids might not remember or know who he is, but probably the best tackle ever. What made him so special, Coach? And what type of teammate was he to you?
Yeah, well, man, I played with him for 11 years. So, yeah, he was the guy for 11 years. We got pretty close. Clearly, physically, he was a freak. When you're 6'9", great feet, long arms, right? You're prototypical now anyway for that position. Ran well, good balance. But he was a very smart guy. He wasn't just like, oh yeah, I'm smart enough to block my guy in front of me, the linebacker. He knew safeties, right? And he knew offense and passing game stuff. So I think that's kind of what separated him. And he was a weird guy. Off the field, he was a very quiet guy, and he read books. He read a lot of books like science fiction, but on the field, he was a very emotional player, very physical player. But he just, was a smart football player, knew angles, just a naturally gifted kid. And tough too, played with a lot of injuries like most guys do. That's kind of like par for the course. But, it's hard, like I said, talking earlier, it's really hard to watch those guys and to some degree to coach those guys, right? If you're an offensive line coach, you're just like, you can't say, well, watch what he does. Because there's 2% of the league that can do that. Maybe not even that, but. And he was a great teammate. Like, I knew him forever, knew his family. I think he's the best lineman to ever play the game. And really, his career was kind of cut short with some injuries with his, turf toe and stuff like that. But I think he loved the game, but he was done. When you're the best of your position for 11 or 12 years, your financial package is a little good. So he thought it was time.
Coach, who was the best player you ever watched or saw?
Oh, man. What was weird? It was great because, I had opportunities to see guys at different levels. I'll give you a couple, just I saw Reggie White. We played against him, Green Bay, and just watching him live. But I grew up watching him. I was an Eagles fan growing up and watching his size and how he could move. I saw Brett Favre. We played them when he was in his prime twice. In one of the games, he just had a Brett Favre game, and it was stunning to kind of watch. Barry Sanders, played him, watching him. He was a guy most of the time, if I'm playing, I just sit on the bench. But there were times in the game where I was up trying to watch him. Man, it was awesome. Being that close and watching them play, these idol type players. I saw Troy Aikman, but that was the end of his career. That was more just that guy guy growing up and cheering against. But yeah, a lot of good players. I was surrounded by greatness. It was weird because you see, like you mentioned, Ed Reed, arguably, I think is the best safety. Ray Lewis, the best middle linebacker. Jonathan. So there's 3 players that are probably the best. Shannon Sharp, one of the best tight ends. On and on and on. Deion Sanders, it was later in his career, but he was the best cornerback. Rod Woodson, probably one of the top 2 or 3 corners and / safety. So I was surrounded by that. But yeah, it was always odd how you would still be mesmerized by these certain players. Playing Randy Moss and seeing him, watching him when we played him was in Minnesota and then with the Patriots, and you get up there and watch and he's walking by and you see 6'4", 6'5" with these arms just running by your guys that are like some of the best in the league. So I got a chance. It was a good era to watch. And we played like Tampa. They had, Warren Sapp. He's kind of an a-hole, but he was a unique player. 330 pound that played a wide 3 technique that could run by you. He was a freak of nature and an angry dude. Junior Seau I had to play him a couple times. I can't describe him as a player. It's like chaos. It's like this chaotic. He's just constantly moving and talking. And as a lineman, you're sitting there and you're so nervous to play him. Like he's coming up in the line, he's running back, he's going over here, and you don't know where he's going to be. And I unfortunately had to play him a couple times. I don't think I played him with the Patriots if he was there, but when he was with San Diego, phenomenal player. So these are these iconic players that I had a chance to play with, and whether watching as an offensive guy, but like being out there for Warren Sapp and for Junior Seau and stuff like that. Javon Curse was a guy that I felt like he was that next Hall of Fame D lineman. He had that run with the Titans. That guy was his nickname was the Freak. He was like 6'6". One thing that people don't appreciate, basketball players, right? On TV, then you go to the games, you see how tall they are and you see their arms, you're like, wow, they look odd up close, right? Because they're so gangly. This is what his build was as a football player, So played a lot of good ones, but some of those names were just like, it was awesome to see it live.
Coach, you won a Super Bowl.
I did.
You brought a Super Bowl championship team.
Yeah, it was good.
Talk about that, Coach, and talk about that team that year and like when you knew they were going to be special.
Well, Brian Billick was good. So the model we see now in the NFL, it was a little bit more physical, right? But the model you see now is based on a lot of what he did. And he was coach under Denny Green, who was with Stanford, and then the Minnesota Vikings, who were successful. It was, when he came to camp, we had a veteran team and a lot of good players. And it was like one full practice, walk through. Practices were short. We get meetings, you're out of here early. You're getting the day off. And everybody was just like, what? Like waiting for the shoe to drop. This is our practice schedule? Like, are you sure? Aren't we supposed to keep hitting, So he brought this in and it was perfect for our team. And really, he had a pretty good run for 8 or 9 years there. He had some pretty good teams, but he came in, it was the perfect team for him. And when he came in, he outlined everything all the way through the Super Bowl. He was a communications guy, a very detailed guy, attention to detail guy. So he brought that kind of new age into how we practice, and the team took it well. But I would say, there was a time probably, we had some struggles where we didn't score for 4 or 5 games. A touchdown. We scored, not touchdowns. And then we kind of figured it out offensively. We made a quarterback change. We changed our philosophy on offense, and we started to roll. So I think we won 8, 9, 10 games. Like we felt there going into the playoffs. I was like, man, I don't see us losing. We clinched the playoffs against San Diego. We still had a couple games left to go, and we were feeling really good. And, you had the number 1 ranked defense, scoring defense of all time, right? That kind of gives you a little bit of confidence. And they all believed it. They believed it. So that's kind of probably like 5, 6 games left in the season. I'm like, we have a legit chance, and our road was perfect for us. Like a lot of times it's matchups. We knew we were going to see Tennessee, and we matched up great with them. I thought Oakland would give us trouble, but Rich Gann ended up getting hurt his shoulder, and that helped us out a lot. But those other 2 teams were perfect match. Denver loved to run the ball. You couldn't run on us. Like Tennessee, the same thing. And we played them so many times, so they were in their division. So I knew those first couple of games we were going to win. And the Giants, I knew we were just going to be physical for them. But yeah, it was like I knew 4 or 5 games on the season we had a chance to win it all.
Talk about that day, though. The game, Coach. Again, you're up at UMaine.
Yeah, it was crazy because it was clearly, to say that it was a highlight of my life is an understatement, And I was lucky, I had family down there and my wife and all that kind of stuff, which was great. And the memories of that and the group of guys that I was with and little things. Like I remember we had this guy, Billy Davis, and he played for the Cowboys when they won Super Bowl. And he goes, hey, we're going to win this game today. He goes, here's what I want you to do. This is before the game. I'm nervous. And take your uniform. Don't wash this. Here, gave me a black bag. You keep it. This is what I did. And you frame it up in the wall. It's like, what is this guy? And it just back of my mind, right? So we win the game and he's like, you got your black bag? So I took my uniform off. I've never washed that uniform. It's framed up in my basement where I never washed it from the game because of him, like stuff like that. And, these memories and certainly the after party and the parades and stuff like that. How many of the last few years, right? These games have been really tight, but we won 34-7. So we're on the sideline and we have like this 8-9 minute window plus with Super Bowl commercials, right? That we're on the sideline and you could celebrate it. You could look to see people in the stands. Everybody's hugging each each other on the sidelines. So we had this like prolonged time to celebrate on the field as a group. So it was great. Professionally, certainly, and he's athletically a highlight of my life, and it's the memories. You forget a lot of the games, but it's the memories, and it kind of bonds you. I mean, you go back now to the game, and it's like, man, you see some of the guys you played with, and fans just, oh, you were on this, they remember you. Like if you were on the team 2 or 3 years before, like I don't remember you, but you win a Super Bowl, you know everybody on that roster, even the linemen. So and I think we're due for our 25th anniversary. My God, so this year, so hopefully I'll go down there for that. But yeah, it was great.
What's so special about Baltimore, though, Coach? Because I mean, it's one of the most now. It's historic franchise.
Yeah.
They're always in the playoffs. They're always in the hunt for something.
Yeah.
And it's just, in a lot of ways, I think it's the standard.
Yeah, I mean, ownership was good. Art Modell, I loved. He was an old school owner. Of course, he's hated in Cleveland I get that, right? Because I know people from Cleveland. I played with a guy from Cleveland I get it. He was a great guy, good ownership, and Steve Bisciotti came in and doubled down on that ownership. I think it's one of the best franchises in the NFL right now. You look at that, like, consistent winners. They've won 2 Super Bowls. So they're knocking on the door for another one. They're always competitive. They draft well, great facilities. Like, it's them, it's the Patriots, right? There's a few other good ones, but they're up there. It's like a big town, very similar to Boston. It's like you label it a city, but it's really just a big town, and they're nuts. They're nuts for their team, and when the Colts left, right, it was a sad day, and they embraced the Ravens. And which was very unique when we first got there. Part of, I think, the transition for Art Modell and the organization was to combine the Colts and the Ravens history. Because when we first got there was a lot of Baltimore Colts that lived in the area, worked in the area, that whether it's Johnny Unitas to Artie Donovan and they were doing radio, and they'd come out to the team, and they used to have these things they may have been called Colt boosters, but they'd have these like fan clubs, and it would be different towns: Havre de Grace, Maryland, Ellicott City, where you'd have your own club, and all they do is come together, watch the Colts, celebrate the team, have monthly meetings, do booster thing, charity things, and they transition to call these things Ravens Roosts. So they have them all over Maryland. It's crazy. Like, it's a very unique environment. The Orioles, and they've struggled, and they weren't loved because the ownership. So like Baltimore Ravens were everything to them. And all these Ravens Roosts would have all these different things, and they wore it with pride. So it's a big city, very unique. Like, the depth of the fandom in Baltimore is pretty intense, to the point where, like, my wife would walk through town and they'd be, oh, hey, Mary, how you doing? How's Mike doing? He did good the other day. So, I mean, they're pretty intense.
Yeah, so my last NFL question is, talk about that Pittsburgh Steelers rivalry.
Oh, it's a good one, yeah. Hateable, very hateable. Very hateable team, very hateable city, very hateable fan base. I still dislike them. I like seeing them lose more than the Ravens win. And a lot of that has to do with we lost a lot of tough games to them, and still do. And it was never a rivalry till finally in 2000 when we finally bit back, and we won at Three Rivers Stadium for the first time in Ravens history. And if you count a little bit of like the Cleveland or the Baltimore, this is before Cleveland came in. Cleveland history, they didn't win in Pittsburgh either for a long time. So then it became a rivalry, and it got nasty. I mean, you name it. Fights in the field, fights going out to the bus. Man, they were great to play in. I do miss that. And it usually delivers. What I like about it now is, like, there's rarely rivalries that still deliver, and it still does. And there was a time early when we played at Memorial Stadium, and the Steelers fans, like, don't get me wrong, they travel great. They are as good as you can get for fans, and they would be a lot of them in the stands. And we started winning. And Saragusa made a comment on TV that I don't want any more Pittsburgh fans that are say, if you see them, you take them into the bathroom, you pull a shirt over their head, and you just beat the crap out of them. Like, he says this on live TV, right?
Oh my God.
And it just went wild. You know what I mean? So that's the kind of rivalry thing it was. And obviously it was tongue in cheek, clearly, because I think we, as Ravens and stuff, we used to do all these TV shows, and trust me, when he made these comments, he had probably had about 4 or 5 pitchers of beer. So, but it was great. But that's kind of rivalry it was awesome. I remember we used to play them on Sunday Night Football. They called it, the Sunday Night Brawl. They changed the name and stuff like that. And it delivered, man. And the personalities in that, and the two defenses too, how they have to play, how they attack, how they hit, how they talk. It just raised the level of intensity of games, and it was something special. But I also been in Pittsburgh when you were getting your butt kicked. I mean, I remember one Monday night game we played, and we're down 35-0, and the terrible towels. And you want to talk about, and this was like in the first half, you want to talk about wanting to go under a rock. You know what I mean? But then we had some big wins too, though. So
let's talk about your transition to leaving the NFL.
Yeah.
You have to hang it up eventually because
yeah.
Talk about that, and then transitioning to your life afterwards.
Yeah. I mean, it's a tough transition, right? Because you go, I was in the NFL at 22. I was done at 33-ish, 34, and but when you leave the NFL, I'm still like 22 because you don't really have to grow up. So you're like, what? But by the time I get done, like, it wasn't like I was just myself. I ended up having a wife, a kid, another kid on the way. And you're like, well, what do I do now? There was an easy transition for me. I did media for a while. I did it in Baltimore. I did it up in Boston for 98.5, for NBC Sportsnet down in Baltimore. I did a bunch of TV shows down there. That was like an easy transition, right? It kept me busy talking about sports. Being an ex-player, right? You have opportunity to do that if you get insight. And I was lucky. My first time down in Baltimore, the guys that were there were like, hey, you have a good knack for this. You got a personality. You know how to speak, right? You can speak intelligent. You have knowledge of the game. And they kind of gave me some pointers, so that helps. So I did that for a while coming out, and that kind of leveled off, right? It wasn't scratching the itch that I really wanted. It was okay, but then it became about entertainment, and you get into the business and you're in it, right? There's entertainment value to that, and I end up having to transition to something different, right? Something that I enjoy way more. I wanted to be back in the game, because sports talk radio and all that is great, but it wasn't competitive for me. I didn't want to go that route of being competitive and being hot take guy, so like at some point there was going to be a natural transition out of that.
So how did you end up getting the job at Pingree?
You know what? It's coaching the youth level. I had the lacrosse coach at Pingree. He coached my son at various times growing up in town. He's from town. He's like, hey, listen, I think the football coach is leaving. This may be an opportunity to coach high school football. And honestly, I was like kind of scared. I'm just like, really? Like, I don't know. I know football, but I don't know how to coach. Of course, that's my own fears and self-doubt there like that. So, I thought about it and I decided to talk to her. She's like, you got to get out of the house. Like, something's not clicking for you, I applied for the job at Pingree. And it was weird because, most jobs, I think I got the Pingree job like almost in August. Like, it was nuts. It was because the coach left. I think his wife got a job like later and, he had to go. It was like down in the DC area. So it was very late. So most jobs are, especially the prep school job, are like January. People know they're going. So I jumped on that late. So it's like, I never really, I met the captains, but I didn't meet any of the players. And really till we started camp. Like, that's nuts, right? Yeah. Now here, you got a whole off season and most teams do that. So I just felt like, once I was nervous to do it, once I started, I was all in. And ever since I said yes to that has been, minus playing football, I honestly didn't realize it would be this rewarding. I initially went in there for my own competitive nature, right? I wanted to be a part of football and I'm competitive and to some degree I wanted to win, but 4 or 5 months into the job, that shifted to everything I did was to see success for the kids. I'm still competitive, but it changed. I had a different focus. But ever since I said yes to that, every day kind of gets better. Love it. I love coaching the high school level. And I thought about it when I was done coaching at the college level and the professional level, and certainly financially, right? There's a lot of advantage to that, but I know a lot of coaches, college and pro, and it's a hard life. I knew we had a couple kids. I knew we were going to look to have at least one more. Being an O-line guy to say that I'm going to be a head coach material to college or pro level wasn't realistic, but certainly positionally, right? Coordinator, and those guys, right? Even really good coaches could have 4 or 5 jobs in 12 years. Yeah. And then there's recruiting and the money, financially the money's there, but I played long enough, right? I was comfortable, I could make some good decisions. So that's why I kind of went away from that, and then I regretted not doing that, and then all of a sudden, this high school football just filled that void, and it's been phenomenal.
What attracted you to Pingree? Because I know, did you know anything about the school prior?
No, not really. I knew about it because the facilities over there, you've been there, right? They didn't have the field, but my son played hockey there. They did basketball there. So that's how I knew Pingree. I wasn't on campus much at all. And I started doing a little homework, and I knew nothing about prep school football, but I read a little bit of their history, and they had had some successful seasons. And from where I live, it was perfect location. Well, met the AD, met a lot, in the interview process, met everybody in the school, met some of the players. Yeah, it felt great. I just took a leap of faith. It was great. And then I was there for 6 years, and it was phenomenal. Had a lot of success, had a lot of great football players, but it was a perfect fit to learn, which was really odd too. It was I brought in one coach, but the rest were the guys that were there. That was one of the things, when I talked to the AD, I said, I want to talk to the coaches because it's July 20th, where am I going to find coaches? Finding a high school coach is the hardest thing to do in the world. You know that. Talking to, you know what I mean? Talk to any high school head coach. Trying to find assistant coaches that they're not getting paid much, if anything, right? Some are getting paid, and it's can you show up at 3? Oh, you got a job? We just hit it off. The coaches that were at Pingree that were there for years, they were great guys. And from day one, they were all in. And they knew the league, and they knew all the teams, they knew all the other coaches, what they did. So I had this great camaraderie with these guys that knew the league, which helped out a lot. And then, as a new coach, the biggest thing is your senior class buying in. And we had a lot of good football seniors that didn't have a lot of success, but it didn't really match their talent. They were better than some of those records. But then when we got the parts together to make the whole, it worked pretty good. So it was a great experience.
I mean, you wouldn't think you only had a few weeks on the job, Coach.
Yeah.
You guys went 8-1 your first year.
Yeah, we got the bowl game, lost to St. Paul's, but it was perfect. I think at the time we played all our most winnable games early, and the hard part of our schedule was late. So we had like this extended preseason, like teams that just on talent alone, right? If we do our job, we can beat these guys. And some of the, one team ended up getting out of prep school. So that helped out a lot, right? Because I had all of camp, and camp and prep school is like this. I mean, we start August 28th and our first game's like a month later. In high school public, it's a lot quicker. You start earlier, but your games start earlier too. So we had this prolonged preseason, and like the first 3 or 4 games were like winnable games, competitive teams, but enough where they could push back, but we should win those games before we got into playing some real like Dexter's, and Kent's Hill was good till we got to those games, So it was great. It was like a perfect like soft landing for a first year coach,
You said the name, you said
Yes.
the word, and I gotta ask because people might not understand. Dexter, Pingree, that rivalry, it's gone now, but that rivalry, Coach, one of the best I've ever been a part of.
It was great, right?
Those first 2 years, too. You guys had battles with them.
Yeah.
Talk about Dexter as a rival, Coach, because, again, from somebody that was there, that was a strong rivalry.
Yeah, those 5 years that I was there, like every game, those first 4 games were close. And then at the end, they were really good. But those first 4 games were back and forth. We won the first 3, last second plays. The 4th game came down there, we lost by 5 points. They made a 4th and 1 tackle from their 20. We were going in for the win. Yeah, it's just, and I loved it too. They were smart enough to schedule it at the end of the year. And I've, after the fact, have talked to Casey. I just talked to him the other day, like multiple times since. We build up these rivals, like we're telling my kids, they don't respect you, and he's doing this. Like, who do these guys think they are? They're talking crap, you know what I mean? You're better than them. But we always had a relationship that was funny. Although, like he probably hated me because we lost those, and I hated him the last 2 weeks when they were kicking our butt. You know what I mean? I said the same thing, when they finally beat us a year. I'm like, you got us. I hate you. You know what I mean? He laughed. But yeah, it was a rivalry, and you felt it. The players felt it. And that's what made it good. And it was emotional. And what made it really good too is you see a lot of games at the prep school level. They're at boarding schools, right? And you don't get the electricity and energy that you necessarily get. There's day games. They play at 11 or 1. There's kids from all over. You don't get the crowd. But you had 2 day schools. So when we played at Dexter, we played at Pingree, there was tons of people there because everybody was in driving distance, and it was the game you had to go to. As that first couple of years, we started getting people that were outside of the Pingree Dexter families to come, hey, we want to go watch this game. And it was an incredible amount of talent. Division I football players, both sides through the course of the 5 years was phenomenal. Great coaching, great programs, committed programs, successful programs, losing 1 game a year type of thing. We played them, I think up until the last year, I think twice we're undefeated. When we played each other, both were undefeated. And the other 2 times, one of us, only had 1 loss, the other one was undefeated. That's the kind of game it was. And it usually meant bowl game, winning the league and stuff like that. And of course, St. Paul certainly had a hand in that, which was a big rivalry, but it was different. It was different. Yeah. Dexter was just closer, day school, like we knew a lot of the kids. What I loved is just the intensity and energy to it. Yeah. For a high school game, it was awesome. Yeah.
I tell people all the time, that 21 game, Coach, my heart still races from it. Like, I still am getting anxiety from it.
But what's crazy is we had the first year we played and we won in overtime, right?
Yeah.
But it wasn't a great game in terms of it must have been buckets of rain, but monsoon type winds. So nobody can really throw. And if you see the highlight of the game winning play where the film was all you see, it's like a haze because it's just rain. So it was 13-6, right? The next year it was 53-51. And then the year after was we had a big lightning storm. So the first half was kind of a grinder, right? And the second half, it just blew up. In the last quarter, we scored 2-3 touchdowns apiece. And then the fourth game was a big scoring first half, and then it came down to the last play. So they're all unique in some way. They always came down to a couple plays here and there, but the intensity was always there. After that first year, because I think Dexter was a good program, but I think they started changing to what they are now. They're. I'm sure there was some sort of internal commitment, but coaching the players they were bringing in, because I think prior to me getting to Pingree, I don't know. They were good, but they weren't great. I think Pingree beat them quite a few times. They were just an okay team. But now they're not. They're very good. So I think that's where both programs took a different turn and were getting more competitive. So it was a perfect rise. So I would definitely miss that. It's going to be weird not coaching against them.
I have a question for one of my sources.
Oh boy.
I wanted to ask you this.
Yes.
So your first 2 years will set the stage. You ran an I formation, more of an under center offense.
Yep.
Post-COVID, that changes. you're in the spread. Talk
Yeah.
about that, Coach. You get to open it up more, and you had a pretty special quarterback to do it.
Yeah, well, I changed that because against St. Paul's, we played him in a bowl game and we lost our starting tight end, our starting running back, and we were built on that heavier offense. And we lost a game that we didn't play well, but when I finally decided to open it up and do things like we should have, we scored on them. That was the genesis of that. Like, you know what? I'm not going to do it anymore. It's too hard. We're relying on these two positions. And that was like, we need to change things up. And we had a kid, before Hudson came in, we had Colton Fahey, who was all league at quarterback. And he was the one that game we won 52-43, had 7 touchdown passes against Dexter. He wasn't a big kid. He ended up going to Bowdoin, not as a quarterback, a receiver, set record as Bowdoin's at receiver. But I mean, this kid had like stones. Like, so he's perfect. I was going to that and I'm looking at my play sheets and it's like, here's a run play action pass and here's my 3 wides. I'm like, no more. I'm going here and I'm doing this. And I simplified everything. But that was the genesis of that and it was great. And then we start bringing in kids that fit that more. And I thought it was just a better way for us to win. It was a lot easier to get some good skill guys, especially when they got the quarterback, than do it the other way. So.
Yeah, but 21, you guys undefeated. I was at a few of your games. That was a complete team. Talk about the 2021 team.
Yeah, that changed. What we changed there is the spread, but now we implemented more of power read, zone read, quarterback run, RPOs. Like that's when, with Hudson's, when we really opened it up because he was a smart kid. And it changed everything. Like, I mean, it was, nobody really stopped us that year. And I'm sure it was an adjustment for everybody, when you see a new team. I mean, it's easy to see it on tape, but it's hard. And we had a lot of pieces. But the biggest thing is we had top end talent. But when you look at your second and third level guys in terms of like tight ends, they were all like really good football players. They were some all conference guys that played in college. Hudson got hurt in the bowl game and Alex Terrio came in and threw for 3 touchdown passes. He was our backup quarterback. We had 3 different running backs. We had 4 receivers. But the biggest thing is we changed our philosophy, but we also changed our defensive philosophy, more of a 3-3 stack look. And it was very successful for us. And we had pieces in place like a big nose guard and a middle linebacker, and they controlled everything. So we're, a complete team. Best team I coached. I believe the year before would have been better. Really? Because, we had Billy Stevens, Caleb Clark, Harrison Greenslade. Billy Stevens went to Colby, Caleb Clark went to St. Lawrence, and Harrison went to Georgetown. Harrison was a game changer. He was like Tim Dowd, he was like Chris Colby. COVID just hurt him with recruiting wise. But those guys would have played, although, Hudson and Colby and some of those other guys would have been a year younger. But those guys were good. We were 8-1 that year. Yeah. We beat Proctor in a bowl game, and we were figuring ourselves out. We changed our offense. Hudson was coming in, so we're adding all that stuff. I think that team would have been better because I think some of those other teams would have been catching up a little bit, But it worked out. But I think that 18-19, those 2 groups are the 2 best teams that I had, and they would have beat a lot of pretty good teams,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, you only lost, I think, I was looking
1 game in those 2 years,
Yeah, so you watched 1 game in those 2 years. I think you went 30-something in like 5?
Yeah.
Why were you able to have success there?
I always thought that winning was like during the week. Like you win the game during the week, So I thought one thing that I loved is practice structure and having played at high school, college, and professional level, right? All these different systems about how to practice. X's and O's aside, right? You're going to have your philosophy, but how you schedule practice, expectations from the team. How do you present those expectations, right? How do you get them to buy into the expectations? I can't even count how many coaches I've had, right, that have done these different things, whether it's positionally, whether it's offensive coordinator, or that next left as the head coach, right? It started within practice and something, being here now, I'll have to change, right? It's just philosophy and practice and toughness and sense of urgency and stuff like that. And I was lucky. You have kids that buy in, that's transition goes smoothly. You don't, it could be rough, but it's different. It's not like professional where you're like, well, we'll just get new guys. Here, you got to work with what you got at the high school level, right? We had talent. You can lose with talent. It's hard to win without talent. If anybody tells you that, then they're just trying to write a book or something. But I think how we structured practice, how I treat the kids, and how I held them accountable, right? They just kind of followed along and they believed in it. And we won a lot of games where we kind of just didn't make mistakes or we came from behind. So they learned some toughness, mental toughness. We figured that out, that grit to it to win some of those tough games. But yeah, once you get it rolling and kids start believing, right? You start winning games you probably shouldn't win. And that's one thing like I do appreciate in my time of all those games. games. We lost to Dexter and we lost to St. Paul's. And then we lost to Hamden Hall one year, and they were like a juggernaut. They went undefeated a couple years ago. Like, we never lost to teams that we should beat, which I like. We were losing to teams that, they're pretty damn good football teams. And you split against those teams, and we did pretty good. So the kids bought in, and it's just kind of a philosophy. I think it comes from practice. Getting them ready to play. He's kind of in the barn. They know what they're doing. I mean, you got to make some adjustments on game day, but I'm telling you, most of it, especially at the high school level, like you see it during the week.
After the 23 season, you decide to leave. But talk about just leaving, because I know it must not have been easy for you.
No, it's tough. I mean, it was tough because I was there for a while. And the transition, my son was coming to high school here, and I knew I wasn't coaching here, but I wanted to watch him play. I wanted to be more a part of that. And then I have younger sons. They started playing football at the youth level, so now I can coach them 24/7. Before that, I would come in, help out now and again. So now it's like with my young sons playing 5th, 6th grade football, I'm going to all my kids' games, because at the time, we would play Friday and Saturday games because the schedule's a little bit different. So would have probably interfered with Pingree a little bit. So that's what I wanted to kind of focus on them. But it was tough. You're with the AD for 6 years, right? You're with the trainer for 6 years, and you're with the kids. And it was more a letdown of the kids, disappointing them. So it was a tough transition. Fortunately, they got a good coach in there, which helps because Pat was on staff with us. At the time, his son came on board, and I was like, I've known Pat for a long time. I'm like, dude, we need a strength coach. You want in? I'm all in. And he was awesome for us. His energy he brought, kind of made us get rejuvenated for that last year for those guys. That helped too. I knew he was probably going to apply. So that made me feel a little bit more that I wasn't leaving hang. But yeah, that was a transition. It was time, and I kind of wanted to see my son play. Ending up here was just kind of like, I worked at Masco last year. Pat Sheehan, Neil Weidman was the offense coordinator, who was Hudson's dad.
I had a great year, Coach.
Yeah, great year. We turned in, I was doing O-line, D-line, working with Neil on the offense. We were working together. Pat's a friggin' awesome coach. I got to tell you, there were other jobs at the prep level that were opening, that there was opportunity that I discussed and talked, and I was like, you know what? I don't think it was going to happen. I just really loved the public school energy, and I loved working with those guys. It was awesome. It was really good football guys, and the reality of it was, I'm just coaching my guys, helping with the offense. Pat has to deal with all the BS, whether it's dealing with parents, buying equipment. Mike, can you be here to help out pass out pads on Tuesday? Yeah, I'll be there. I'm not the one getting, all that kind of stuff. But those head coach, right? You got to do everything, and I'm finding that out here now, right? But I loved it. It was a great experience, and I got to watch. And I'm going to tell you right now, there's so many things that I'm going to take from them and use. As successful as I was at Pingree, as a coach, man, somebody's always doing something a little bit better. And it was great. He took stuff from me, and I loved it. There will be drills and stuff and philosophies and attitudes that I'll take from him, and I'll use it for this team right here. So it was a great learning experience for that. And then, being in town, living around, and having my son go here, then this job opened up. Tim, had an opportunity to go back to Essex Tech. It makes sense, right? He works there. Yeah. You know what I mean? That's like a no-brainer. There was no expectation that was going to happen. And then when it did, it's like, oh man, I think everybody in town I was walking down just trying to get a coffee at the Dunkin' in town. Hey, the job? Hey, were you going for the job? I was like, oh God. I told my wife, I'm like, man, I think I better go for the job. But, I'm happy. When I finally decided, hey, get over the fear of coaching my son, what that dynamic is interesting, knowing people, personal level. Pingree was great. I got to know parents, but it wasn't any personal connection necessarily beforehand, right? And that's what's changed with high school athletics. Parents have changed. They're much more involved. I remember my dad at the time, he would, I don't think he ever talked to my high school coach. Yeah. Said maybe, you know what I mean? Maybe when, oh, thanks coach, he's going to college. It's not like that anymore. Having that history, knowing all these kids. I coached on the team now, most of those kids, I coached in youth football. So that was that's a big reason why I was holding back. That's a just different dynamic I've had to deal with. Because you don't want to ruin relationships over who plays, who doesn't, this wins and law, all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, right, as soon as I said I'm all in, I haven't been happier, and I love coaching my son. It's just great watching him grow. And when you're a football dad, and I was never a guy in any of my youth sports that talk to the coach. I'm like, listen, I always tell people, I hear dads say, you go grab a post, man. Go ahead, sign up. You want to coach. Don't sit here yelling, you know what I mean? But I'm sitting there going, oh, Joe, you should do this. And I'm like, maybe I'll coach, So it's great. It's great. And it certainly helps having the new facility, which is going to be awesome for the kids, awesome for the school. I think it's going to re-energize everything. And I do think like it's going to keep kids in the system, right? Maybe going to private school, all that dynamics changing too, that, it's going to be a place where, you want to stay and play. I mean, we're in the weight room right now, and I tell you, it's a great weight room for a public school. It's great. And there's more equipment, there's more room to grow here too. So it's a good spot to be in.
And Coach, you do have that background though of you were at a prep school.
Yeah.
Now you're at a public school. So if you want to talk about that, the differences and, I guess you're convincing kids to stay rather than leave.
Yeah. So you're always recruiting, right? And prep, public, you're always recruiting. The dynamic is different. The energy around it is different, right? Like at the public level, right, you have boosters, you have communities. There's a very big emotional investment. Prep school is phenomenal players and parents, but you're invested in the team. There's not outside. You don't really have boosters. I mean, parents will do their own thing, but it's different, right? There's a lot more interaction with the principal, the administration. Now school boards are involved, right? It's different, but I loved the energy at Masco. And that's what I'm fired up for the kids here. Like at Hamilton Wenham forever, Saturday at noon, Saturday at 1 games. And we talked about this coming in. That's like a kiss of death for high school football, right? Especially in a smaller town, because my son Joe plays, but he's got an older brother. He's got 2 younger brothers, right? They got soccer, they got flag football. My other son has this. We got family obligations, right? So if my kid's not playing on the team, we're probably not going to the game. But now we have Friday night lights here. Friday nights, people have off. The middle school, the parents, they're gonna go to the games now, So I'm happy that they're gonna be able to experience it. And I have experienced the band, cheerleaders, all that kind of stuff. I love the energy of it. But there's subtle differences, right? Responsibilities as a head coach, how you order equipment, all that kind of stuff is different. That's kind of the behind the scenes stuff, but it's a different energy. But you're right. It's like you're getting kids to commit to your program, and you are recruiting, right? I see kids all the time in the school. Nothing worse when I'm sitting here by the weight room and I see a 6-foot, 180-pound kid walk by, and I don't know who he is. I'm like, hey, why aren't you playing football, right? So you are recruiting, but you're kind of doing it in the school, and you want kids to stay.
What's your pitch to people, in terms of why they should stay, why they should come out and play football for Hamilton Wenham?
Yeah, well, I mean, first and foremost, right, it's the environment, football. I think you can learn a lot of lessons in football. Accountability, discipline, that type of stuff. Being a part of a team, kind of giving my philosophy, what I value as a player, what I expect these guys to do, right? I mean, that's a good message, right? And I find that most kids that play athletics, certainly football, right, that translates into a lot of other parts of their life. In terms of staying, why stay here as opposed to go someplace else? Well, every kid's different, but listen, provide opportunity here. We got great facilities, weight room, field. Like there's not many places that are going to be better than this. What do you want to do? You want to go to a prep school? Why? Why do you want to go to prep school? Because that's what your parents will do? Well, that's what you're doing. But is it because of football? Is it because of athletics? Well, how good can you be? Why don't you play here a few years? Like, I'm all for it. Like, your kid plays here a few years and they think that he's ready to move on. That's fine with me, but is it worth going there? Are you going to be here, play 3 years, then play 2 other sports and still be able to play in college? Or do you want to go there and sit around for 2 or 3 years and maybe never play? Some kids don't know the dynamic of prep school sports, right? People are always coming and going. There are always people coming in, and then you get to the whole PG thing. So I think what I would do is you create a culture here, winning culture, positive culture, energy, buzz. Most kids want to stay. There are kids that are going to leave, but most kids that are on that fence, they want to stay, right? They want to be home. They want to play with their friends. They want to have success here. And that's what we got to build up, because for a lot of years, they did have a lot of success here. So, I built that at Pingree. I know I'm going to build it here. I'm pretty confident in that. I got great coaches. I brought some from Pingree, so that ain't going to change. So just bringing my energy. And this is what I love to do. I'm a football coach, and then I kind of help out in the middle school. It's kind of how I looked at it. When I was at Pingree, all I did was do that. So this is, when you have a coach that's all in, and you're doing everything you can to give them success, right? That kind of, they'll see that. They struggled the last few years for a lot of reasons. So I got to build that up. Like, most programs that haven't had a lot of success, there's a lot of confidence issue, and you got to find a way to figure that out. And you do it in the weight room, right? You do it in the off season. You do it in sevens. You do it in camp, and you get that mental toughness, and it gives them something to grab onto, and that's when you start winning. So, it's an easy sell. It's easy to sell myself, easy to sell the program, to get kids into the program. We've already got, in a school, this is 5, 6, 7 new kids that are on board, kids that are left that are coming back, 7 brand new kids, which in a school our size is big when you look at the percentage of the boys. So I think it's going to be pretty good.
Let's talk about the generals for 2025.
Yeah.
players that you hopefully will stand out, and the expectations you do have in year one.
Yeah, well, I mean, my expectations are playoffs, certainly. And that's another thing that draws me to the public. The playoff is awesome. Like I dealt with that last year, and once you make it and that buzz, it's like that one and done feeling is phenomenal. I mean, you had it in the bowl games, it's just a different feel. But yeah, we have a great senior class. Caden Schrock's a really good football player, Luke Militano, guys like that. They've been around a while, and they've had a tough lot, right? They struggled. Last year was tough for Tim. No practice field. No home games. You have to have tremendous amount of talent and mental toughness and fortitude to get through that season. I mean, they were practicing on an elementary school field on a Tuesday, a park on a Wednesday. It was a disaster. Bringing equipment. Joe was changing at the house. Never having a home game. And playing at odd times. You know what I mean? So they've had a tough lot. You know what I mean? So it's really, they've bought in. They're coming in the weight room. They've been leaders in the weight room. We have a good freshman and 8th grade class coming out, and now it's filling in that void in the middle, what we got to do. But my expectations will be playoffs. I look at some of those games. I mean, I've watched every game last year live, watched multiple times in film, and there's opportunity there where we could have won some of those games. We're winning at the halftime, winning in the third, down by 6 or 7, and we just kind of fall apart as a group. So if we get something where we can grab onto and kind of finish some of those games, I'm guessing, 4-4, something like that could probably get us in. So I'm absolutely thinking playoffs.
Awesome. And then, Coach, we always end our interviews if you wanted to thank people that have been big in your journey, like if you want to shout them out, no matter who it is, who would you like to show appreciation for?
Oh, God. I mean, I'm 50 now. I mean, I don't know if you have, this is like when the Oscar thing and you got to, I mean, it goes on the line. I mean, I had great youth coaches. My high school coach, Bill Wise, was great. College coach, Joe Gilbert, who showed me a lot. Kirk Ferentz. My coaches here that I've been around, Paul Sway, Andy Williamson, Marty Cook, that have kind of come on board that stepped in with a high school level. All those guys have been influential, you know what I mean? Coach Cosgrove, the list goes on. The older you get, really, there's so many people because, I found football-wise, and, I'll take stuff from guys I played. I respect a lot of coaches that I've coached against, or I've coached with, right? Pat Sheehan taking me on last year and saying, hey, whenever you want to come back, just come back, but learning from him, Neil, some of the players. So yeah, it's a long list. Clearly, you could thank a lot of people. Certainly thank the system here, the hire me. Certainly take a chance. But everybody's been a big part. It's been a pretty good journey. I look forward for the next how many years here in Hamilton Wenham.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Coach. For
anytime, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I hope it was interesting, man.
I think plenty of people
All
will
right.
find this interesting. Everyone, take this time to like, share, and subscribe. And thank Coach Flynn in the comments, y'all. Not everybody. The man's sick, and he sat down with us today.
No problem.
Thank you, Coach.
Yeah, no problem.